Right, hello and welcome to our KidBlog webinar on connecting with other classrooms down the hall within your district or around the world. Thank you so much for taking some time to check out and listen in on our webinar. We know that you will get a lot of value out of this presentation, as well as some great content that hopefully you can go back home or back into your classroom and implement into your KidBlog classroom right away. So I will go ahead and start by introducing our presenter for today. Our presenter is Caitlin. Caitlin is a second and third grade teacher in Northeast Indiana. She is a graduate of Valparaiso University, where she was also a cheerleader. She has been teaching for 5 years, and she has used KidBlog in her classrooms for 4 of those 5 years. Caitlin loves cheerleading, running, including half marathons, which is insane, and reading. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass the presentation on over to Caitlin to get started with her presentation on connecting with other classrooms. So one moment, we'll get Caitlin's screen up here. Great, welcome in, Caitlin.
Hi there. Good morning. All right. Can we see my screen?
We can, we're good to
All
go.
right. Awesome. Okay. I'm very excited to share some ideas and my experience with connecting with other classrooms, not only within my school, but within the state and kind of around the globe as well. So I have some little tidbits and advice on some how-tos and just some experiences that I've had with my students. Um, so I'd like to kind of start with some of the benefits of making connections. I know for myself, one of the biggest challenges was just taking that risk of stepping back and putting trust with my students to make good choices while communicating with others online. However, when I did kind of sit back and think about it, I thought the benefits truly can outweigh some of these challenges that might be faced. For example, giving students an authentic audience. I've realized once I started allowing my students to post blog and post a blog or publish their work online, it actually gave them an authentic audience. They were so much more motivated when they knew that somebody else would see it. And it was just a fun experience as well. One of my favorite ways of one of my favorite benefits of making connections with others is I can truly embed digital citizenship skills for my students. They're going to be connected on social media eventually if they're not already. So as teachers, I truly feel that it's our mission to teach them skills now and how to safely blog and communicate effectively with others online. One way that I have used KidBlog is we blog about books that we are reading. We do book recommendations. And so it truly has developed a community of readers where we're blogging, commenting, posting on our favorite books, giving recommendations to our friends. So it just feels like a big community of readers and writers. And of course, my favorite way is the respect for diversity. When I open the doors and let my students make comments on, first of all, each other's work, and then we went a little bigger and were connected with students from other states, they really did have this, we had to realize that, others have different opinions than us, and how do we approach that positively when you disagree with someone? How do you comment? How do you communicate when you disagree? And so this is the link to my KidBlog that I'd like to share. And let's see here. Okay. So we are Miss Howman's third graders, and I made sure, I knew that I would want to connect with others this year, so I put third graders in Indiana blogging about our reading. And I'll just kind of scroll down here, and I'll get back to this. I have some examples from my students' blogs that I'll be sharing throughout the presentation. But if you notice, you can kind of see in the settings, some of these are drafts where only me and the student can see class members. So this student really only wanted his class members to see. And if I scroll down, most of these are class members, but then you can also see some students have actually asked to have public access as well. So I'll go back to my presentation now.
Hey, Caitlin, can I interrupt you with a quick question?
Yes, absolutely.
When students blog in your classroom, are they picking which audience they want their post to be published to, or is that something that you decide?
It honestly depends on the situation. Most of the time, I allow my own students to choose, do they want their post to be seen just by me, the teacher? Do I want them to have just their classmates see it, or public? And for the most part, I let them choose. I mean, I didn't do that right away. It took some modeling and, talking about the different scenarios. One thing that I talk to my students about is we only publish our best work. And until it's the best, no one sees it except for me, them. And if they feel like it is their best work, then it can be published to the public. So I teach them that, we practice it. So, when we first started going, I was the one kind of showing them, all right, let's just do you, me. And then once we talked about what good posts look like, what our best work looks like, then I gave them the freedom to choose, okay, who do I want my work to be seen by? And this is probably one of my favorite settings of KidBlog, is that the students or teacher can choose who sees the work.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so now I just want to talk about how I was able to make some connections. First of all, I realized that you have to think about your goals for your blog. What is the content that your students will be blogging about? What grade levels? I have a third grade group. However, some of the connections we've made are with fifth graders, second graders. So think about what grade levels you would like to connect with. And then also one of the biggest things is, what do I want my students to gain from blogging? Do I want my students to learn from others? And that was kind of what I was thinking with connecting with a fifth grade class. I'd like for my students to kind of see what these fifth graders are reading, and do my students want to be challenged, or do they see a good book recommendation that they would like to read at home with the help from a parent? Or by blogging with younger students, do I want my students to be the role model and kind of give them tips and advice? So you should be thinking about the content and who you'd like to connect with. And then how I got started connecting is I truly did use my own personal teaching professional learning network. I thought about who I connect with on my Twitter account, Facebook, Google+. So how I started with, first of all, I searched within the KidBlog connection, and how I did that was, I'll just kind of show how to access your connection. So if I go here and I go to my settings here, you'll see up at the top there is a spot for connections. And I started here. You can now see who some of my followers are, who I am also following. And if I scroll down, this is one of my favorite parts. It actually gives us suggested connections. So if I look down through here, I can kind of see, all right, this looks like to be, I'm going to assume a fourth grade class. Maybe this one actually says fifth grade. And it kind of gives the small description over here. So if you are going to connect, I suggest that you put a pretty good description on who you are and what you are blogging about as well. If I look on here, grade class, fourth graders who love to blog. And if I want to check that out, I just kind of click on theirs, and it'll take me to who they are. Let's see here, if I go to, let's say I want to try blogging with maybe maybe this class year, this fourth grade class, and it's up to date. It says 2016-17. When I go here, I can see what they have published to the public. And I also kind of look to see, all right, when were they blogging? I mean, if it was, you know, months and months and months ago, I probably don't want to connect with them because they may not be utilizing KidBlog as much. But now when I see, okay, they're fourth graders still have to blog, I can kind of look to see what they've published to the public. You know, would my students be interested in connecting with them? And then I would hit follow. And when I hit follow, I would choose my class that I want them to follow with. And I usually do send a little message, you know, hey, I'm a third grade teacher. We're a third grade group in Northwest Indiana. You know, we blog about what we love to read. We give book recommendations. We sometimes blog about our writing. Would you like to connect with us? So then I would send that, and if this teacher approves, then we would be connected, and our students could actually read each other's posts and make some meaningful comments back to one another. So that's how I got started with using just the KidBlog to connect. And then another great way is, honestly, I shared my KidBlog link with Twitter. I have a lot of other teachers around the world that I personally connect with via Twitter, and so basically I just said, you know, because you know Twitter is short. I shared the link to my class. Hey, check out my students' blogs. We'd love to connect with you. We're a third grade class. We blog about our books and giving book recommendations. You know, follow this link, connect with us. And that was a great way. After putting it on Twitter, I started getting a lot of follow backs. And so I also included here, you know, make sure you tag at kidblog.org with it, because that's one of the best ways to connect with others. Facebook, another way that I found people to other classes to connect with was on the KidBlog Facebook page. You know, they have a great group of teachers who are posting and connecting with Facebook as well. So again, same thing as Twitter. I got on, I shared my class link, my KidBlog posts, and again, I said, hey, any teachers out there who want to connect, we'd love to read and write with you guys, so connect with us. And then also Google Plus. This is a new one for me, so I'm hoping to get started a little bit more with Google Plus and getting, you know, the KidBlog page. I am following them, so this is another great way to connect with others. And then, of course, get another teacher to join with you in your school. I mean, there's no better way to do that. And again, think about it. Do you want it to be another same grade level, or do you want to connect with maybe, you know, a higher level class, you know, sixth graders, seventh graders, maybe a classroom in the middle school, or if you're an older teacher right now, maybe you want to do the younger ones and, you know, be the ones who are giving examples and being the teachers, you know, give those students some confidence to, you know, really publish their best work so that they can teach others. Or, you know, for me being the younger one and I'm connected with some fifth grade teachers, why not give my students the power of challenging themselves and trying to, you know, keep up with writing of fifth graders, and before they publish it, you know, is this writing good enough? Do I want these big fifth graders to see my work? So, you know, that's another great way, just, you know, and it's nice to have somebody nearby as well, you know, when you can just pop down the hallway and say, hey, what are you doing on KidBlog right now? All right. So that's another great way, just to use your colleagues down the hallway and join together. So these were just some ways that I have found some connections, because that's when you are knowing that you want to connect and open the doors for your students. A lot of teachers say, okay, how do I do this? You know, and the best way for me, I have previous experience with myself having my own professional learning network, and so I branched out for that. And so a great way for you, if you aren't on Twitter, Facebook, a great way to start is utilizing the teacher down the hallway with you, and then of course just using the searches within KidBlog. You would just go to settings and look up connections, and just start asking around, follow him, follow this teacher, follow this class, give them a little, shoot them a little message, hey, let's connect. So those are just some of my, my experiences and my tips for finding those connections. Okay, so now you're connected. Now what? Where do I begin? Because this can be very scary now that your students are actually publishing work and they are going to be commenting and communicating with others that they don't know face to face. And so that can be kind of scary for some teachers. However, you have to keep in mind the benefits truly outweigh the challenges. Just because these students will be involved with social media, they will be, one of the skills they need to know these days is how to communicate positively and effectively online. So I am passionate about teaching students now how to do that. So I first began with just teaching my students what a blog is. Why do people blog? Share examples of real blogs. I follow some other teaching blogs. I brought those up and we kind of talked about, all right, the purpose of this blog is to, is for teachers to look at and get ideas and inspiration from other lessons. I keep my own blog, and so I share my professional blog with my students as well. We practice, I modeled writing meaningful posts. Here's the purpose of today's post. Let's do this. We did a few together. We talked about our purpose. We wrote, and then we talked about, okay, who do we want to share this with? Do we want to share it with just my teacher? Do I want to share it with just only my classmates to see? Or do I want to share it with the public, who we're connected with? Are we going to go global with this one? One of the biggest challenges was how to write meaningful comments because, me being the teacher, my students are reflective of me, and so I knew, when they go to comment on another class's post, I want them to have constructive feedback. I want them to have kind feedback because, second and third graders, a lot of times, you're like, well, that's a crazy idea, or I totally think that's so weird. We talked about, we blog about, when we comment, it needs to be kind, it needs to be effective, and there needs to also be a purpose on why you're commenting as well. We always get those, oh, awesome work, that's cool, good book, I read that too. And I really wanted my students to have much more meaningful comments. So I modeled that, and I continue to model it when I get on the Kid Blog, and I write comments to my students. I'll put a question in there. I will, praise them. I will give them a suggestion. So just by modeling and me continuing to comment on my students' posts has been a great way for them to see, okay, now that I know how to comment, I can go over to another class blog and put an effective comment there too. We did a lot of practicing first, and finally, when I
interrupt you, one more question. So, how do you manage comments? Do you allow them to come in from connections, and then do you moderate them at all?
Right, and I'll go ahead and skip ahead. This was something that my next slide here, connected. Now what? How often can students comment? What settings do I want to control? How do I want to be notified? And then again, what private info will my students be sharing? Well, I will, when I go back to my blog here, I will show how I have chosen to moderate this. So if I scroll back up and I go back into my settings here, it is in the privacy tab. Knowing that I'm going to be opening up the doors for my students and allowing others in, allowing my students out, I knew that privacy is going to be a setting that I definitely want to be in control of big time. So here, if you see, I have these are just the posts. What audience may my students request when publishing a post? So when my students go to publish their work, a pop-up comes up and it says, do they want their teacher, class members, connections, and guests, or is it out to the public? And I just recently made this one available to my students, the public. Always before, I let them control these three, but I was in control of this one. But after, giving my students the responsibility and I felt we had enough practice with it, I started letting my students choose to open up and publish to the public as well. So if you can see here, I can turn these on and off. Do I want to be emailed? Do I want to have um, do I want to approve first? And I chose to let the class within the class. I chose not to approve. Once they comment on another student's work, it's there. However, I didn't do that right away. We had practice with it after I got past the practice parts and I was allowing my students to actually go for it. That's when I turned this off. So when students comment within our own class blog, I don't have to approve of it. However, the connections that I have, I do I do still approve those. And then, of course, the public. I feel much more comfortable when I see it before my students do. And then the comments. This is one that I kept this on big time for a very, very long time. So I approved when my students commented on each other. This one I still have approvals when the connections, when classes come into our blog and they comment, I still approve of that. And really it doesn't take long. When I log in to our class blog, it'll show me that there's this many comments to approve of. Very simple process. I just click comments and so I'll kind of just quickly go and show that. So then when I log in here, you can see at the top, here's all the posts and then the comments tab. If I had any to approve of, there would be a little orange here that says how many I need to approve of. And here I can see I can either hit approve or unapprove. This is kind of cool right now because these are all students that are not in my class. They're from classes that we are connected with. And so this is another teacher that was actually from the public. So this was really excited for my students when they saw that, wow, somebody from the actual public got on our blog and commented. And I was able to get somebody from the public to comment on our blog again by posting it on a Google. It was about a digital citizenship, and I posted it on a Google Plus Digital Citizen for Indiana website, and then I also posted on Twitter. And so, and I allowed the public to come in and give feedback to my students on that. But some of these students here are from the connections that we already made. So we kind of know these students up here, which is kind of fun. And again, here's another one that was actually from the public. And the way I was able to bring the public into our blog was using my own personal professional learning network. So it's a, great tip for teachers, get out there and start connecting with other teachers so that you can connect your students as well. And of course, lead by example. I'm learning how to make connections with other teachers, and I am modeling that and trying to get my students to be able to develop that skill as well, as I know it is definitely going to be needed when they're out in the workforce and in college and whatever path they choose. Okay, and now I'll go back to my slides here. And okay, so once we got past the practice, I began again blogging with my students. I got on and I was commenting on their posts. I a few times got on and got to some of the classes that we were connected with and showed my students how I was commenting on their work. Be consistent when commenting on your students' posts. Lead by example. I need to make sure that I'm not only commenting on this student. How often am I going to get on? Do I need to comment on every student's work? No, but it's just a great idea to be consistent. One big tip that I have when you're ready to connect with others is having the very first post embed a digital citizenship lesson. I had my students get on their very first post was students, they tell what they're going to be blogging about, why they're blogging, and I also had them do a little pledge to be a good digital citizen. It was just a great kickstart to opening up the doors for my students because I kept referring back to this pledge that they took. You know, hey, remember when you said that you would only publish your best work? Is this your best work? Oh, do you remember when you said you would only comment kind words to one another and good feedback to another student? And I do want to share an example of a few of my students' posts from that first kid blog post here. Let's see if I click on, the student. And when I click on the student here, it shows me all of their posts that they've had. And if I go back down to my first blog right here. So Annie says, hi, my name is Anna, and today is my first blog, and I'm going to be talking about how I'm going to use this for my books. I'm going to talk about how good they are. I promise to always communicate positively and be kind. So just by kickstarting, kickstarting our connections, and I came back to this pledge throughout the year. You know, remember when we made that promise that we were going to talk to others in a positive way. We're only going to be kind with our words. I'll show another one. Again, I scroll down to her first blog here. Let's see here. Ashlyn's first blog. Okay. So when I click my first blog, hi, I'm Ashlyn. I'm going to show you all the coolest books that I can read. So she's telling me, you know, what she's going to be blogging about. I promise to only blog and post about books and my best work. So it was one of my favorite uses of Kid Blog, and since we are having connections, is I get to truly embed and teach these students when they're young those digital citizenship skills, which will be so important to them as they continue to, you know, get social media accounts, when they are going to be communicating with others online. So it's such an important skill to embed and develop within them when they are young. So that's one of my greatest success stories of going global with Kid Blog, is teaching these students when they're so young how to be a good digital citizen. And then I think I kind of already went over some of these. You know, one of my favorite features of Kid Blog is that we have control over who sees our content. I love, love, love the fact that I can choose, is it me as the teacher controlling, or, you know, are my students controlling? And since we talked about only publishing our best work, I gave my students the opportunity and the responsibility of deciding, is this truly my best work, and do I want the public to see it? Or do I want my teacher to give me some feedback first before I go and change it to make it public? So it's also developing those skills too, you know, those you know, students are going back and kind of having that meaningful conversation within themselves. Is this truly, you know, something that I want the world to see? So I love, love, love the feature and the settings that allows teachers and students both to control. And of course, there have been times when I had to go in and I see, okay, this is definitely not the best work from this student. They actually did publish it to the public. Okay, then I can step in and I can go and change that setting. I can have that discussion with the student and say, you know, really, do you really feel like this is truly your best? You know, what can we do to fix this? And then they can learn from their mistakes too. You know, they can think back, okay, oh yeah, I remember when Miss Heilman said this to me and this wasn't my best, so I'm not going to publish it just yet to the public. I'm going to just send it to her. So I love that students are able to control that setting, but then of course I feel a lot more comfortable knowing that I overall can control that setting as well too. So if a student does do it to public, I can make the change as well. So when you are ready to connect, these are just some important questions. You know, how often do you want your students to comment on another blog? I have a little expectation in my room where they have to publish an exemplar post first. Once they have published their own post, then they can start getting on classmates and the other classes that we are connected with, and then they can start going back in and commenting on their work. So that's worked very effectively for me. We say, you know, your own blog, publish your own blog first, your own post, then go back and comment. And again, I think I've already gone over, you know, what settings do I want to control. This is probably one of the most meaningful and the most challenging is for the teacher to start, what do I want to control? And then again, how do I want to be notified? There is a space, you can choose to be emailed, and I started out that way, and then I realized, holy moly, I'm getting tons of emails. It was just easier for myself to log into our kid blog, and then I can just see how many comments I need to get on and improve. So I turned off the email setting, and it still was effective, and I was able to keep up with it. And then another question to consider is, what information do I want my students to be able to share? You saw on my kid blog where some of my students were actually posting pictures of themselves, selfies. We did a lot of digital citizenship skills discussions before I decided to let my students post pictures of themselves. And of course our school does the, we make sure our students are safe online. So of course if I had any students who were not allowed to post names or pictures, of course, took them aside and said, okay, let's just do an emoji picture here. So I did let students control if they wanted to put a picture. Of course, when I first started, no. But as I've gotten, this is my 4th year using KidBlog, and I've gotten myself comfortable with it. I feel like I've effectively shown students what they should and can post. So I let my students put pictures up if they want. I love giving students that choice. And then also when you set up your class usernames, do you want, first names, a username that may not have their full name in it. So that's another, when you're opening up the doors to the world, you have to decide, what information do I want my students to see, and what do I want my students to put out there. And again, it takes a lot of teacher modeling and practice to get your students able to think about, is this safe? Should I put this on there? So teachers need to be aware of that and, be the best role models that we can be. And then finally, I just want to say good luck, and I hope that I was able to share some tips, and I just want to say that I've had a great experience making connections. This past year was probably my most successful year. My first year using KidBlog, I really just kept it within our classroom. Students were commenting just on each other, and then once I started personally building up a professional learning network and I was connecting with others, and I really realized how much I was learning from others, I thought, okay, it's time. I need my students to be able to do this as well. If I'm doing it, I'm learning so much. They're going to need to know these skills. They're going to need to know how to be safe online. It's time. So I have seen so many benefits of it. I've had so much fun reading what other students in other classrooms are writing about, what other teachers are doing with their students. I saw some posts by a class, and I got inspired for a lesson. I'm like, oh, that's really cool that this teacher was doing this with them. I want to try that with my students. And so we did kind of a very similar lesson, and then it made for some great comments and great feedback with that class as well. Another, if you want to take it a step farther, which this is a goal for myself for next year, why not, we're writing together with these classes around the country, why not meet? We can utilize Skype and we can do a Skype with a class and actually see them face to face. So that's a goal that I have set for myself for continuing with making connections. So again, thank you for listening. I hope I gave some great advice, and I hope that you have a great experience connecting your students. Thank you.
Caitlin, thanks so much. That was some great content. Um, so, um,
Awesome.
yeah, so thanks to you, and then thanks again to the listener for listening in. Um, Caitlin, again, had some great stuff to share with you, and hopefully some really usable stuff that you can go back and get started right away connecting. If you do have any questions on using KidBlog in your classroom, or even if you wanted to expand to the school, and Caitlin talked about connecting and joining a class down the hallway, or even bigger picture, getting your entire district roped into KidBlog and seeing the benefits there, please email us at membership@kidblog.org, and we will get back to you within the day and get you set up. Otherwise, any other questions, feel free to email that as well. So again, thanks, Caitlin, and thanks everyone for listening in.
Thank you.